Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Tracks Through Time. I am your host and FreightWaves Deputy Editor, Brielle Jekyll, and I'm here to tell you about some of the most interesting stories throughout history in transportation and freight. And as always, I am here with Mary O'Connell, fellow FreightWaves TV host, and today we are talking about the logistics of the Boston Tea Party.
I am very excited about this, mostly because I didn't know that there was logistics behind it. But I mean, the tea had to get to the harbor to dump in there, and the people had to get there. So I'm excited for this topic. I don't know a lot about it. Most of my Revolutionary War knowledge and the Revolution comes from Hamilton. So this is going to be great.
I know. I've been having Hamilton in my head all week as I prep for this, even though they never mentioned the Boston Tea Party once. But pretty much I've kind of finessed the logistics part of this episode. It's not really...
So the real question is, Brielle, are you going to start breaking out into like a song or a rap to tell us this story? Or have you taken just the writing way out instead of, did you write your way out?
I have a mic in my face right now. Do not bring this up because I will just burst out. Because Hamilton's been, I literally fell asleep, by the way. I fell asleep to the soundtrack the other day because I just was like, I don't have time to watch it, but I need to listen to it. I'm sorry, the original cast recording. And so it's just literally so I'm just waiting to break out in song. I mean, before this, I was just like,
I'm excited for this because, you can't take away your shot, I wonder just how many Hamilton fans I can weave into this episode, which we know that those aren't necessarily related to the Boston Tea Party, but who doesn't love a good pop culture reference?
Yeah, I feel like this is like a side. This could be like, in the Marvel, it's like the Marvel universe has like a side, all these side movies. This is like the side movie to Hamilton, like a different, because it's like similar characters, but it's not all the same. It's a total different cast of characters. It's
like the friend group separates, and half of them go off and write the Declaration of Independence and start a new government, and the other half are like, we're gonna go do some stuff.
Well, this one has like Sam Adams and stuff. I don't really get into that part of it because I just wanted to kind of get over into like the logistics and like what some kind of fun facts about it. But yeah, it's a whole like side character thing. But I'm sure a lot of you already know the details of the Boston Tea Party, but there's some interesting stuff that I didn't know about. So we're going to go all the way back to 1773. Before the United States was even a country. And we're coming up on the anniversary. It is December 16th, so that'll be this weekend. And it was a cold December, and tension was brewing in the colonies, which is kind of like a pun because Sam Adams.
And tea, because you brew tea.
Oh, true, duh. Of course, I would go to beer and not tea. We know a lot of this from our 6th grade history books, but for those of you who aren't continually looking into the history of the Boston Tea Party, the facts behind the incident are a little different than you would think. The spark that ignited the Boston Tea Party wasn't a tax hike, but was actually a corporate tax break. In 1773, the Tea Act reduced total taxes on tea sold by the East India Company in America, making it more affordable for the colonists. But the continuation of the 3 pence per pound duty and the lack of colonial input fueled opposition. So it wasn't really about higher taxes. It was really a matter of self-governance. And the Tea Act wasn't just a political move. It was a lifeline for the financially struggling East India Company. And this corporate bailout was considered a form of too big to fail, created a virtual monopoly, really threatening the interests of wealthy merchants like John Hancock. Commercial concerns more than political principles really motivated many protesters. So everyone thinks this is about they say taxation without representation, which is a huge part of this. But this was all more business oriented rather than politically oriented. Even George Washington, who was obviously a very key revolutionary figure, he condemned the Boston Tea Party because he supported the cause of he supported the cause for America, but he really disapproved of the destruction of the tea, emphasizing the sanctity of private property and suggesting that people should pay compensation for the damages, because essentially it wasn't really hurting the English government. It was really hurting the East India Company. It was their tea thrown into the harbor.
Kind of the whole you damage your neighbor's property, you should probably not do that. You're like, I appreciate the statement you made, but you didn't.
It's almost like it's kind of almost being like, well, the government gave Target a tax break, but everyone in my state didn't like that, so we attacked Target and vandalized their store. It's kind of not exactly the same, but similar. So, and the Boston Tea Party itself didn't really garner unanimous support among Americans. Like I said, a lot of people saw it as vandalism, not heroism. But what happened was the British reaction. So the intolerable acts that united colonists in opposition. So the closure of Boston's port annulled self-government in Massachusetts and expanded the Quartering Act, and it led to the First Continental Congress. And the identity of the Tea Partiers, known as the Sons of Liberty, were completely shrouded in secrecy for decades. I mean, for years, they really did a good job of hiding who they were for fear of their safety. We know that Sam Adams was a huge part of it, and a lot of our founding fathers were. But even after we gained our independence, they still feared legal consequences, and so they were scared of being condemned from elite, like people whose money it was that they damaged. So today, only a few names are known, but it really shows the lasting impact of their actions on the country. But we do know that approximately 116 people were documented to have participated in the dumping of the tea, which I think is kind of cool. Just
that is a lot, because for 116, first of all, I thought it was like 5 people like dumping it into the thing. But for 100 and you said 106 or 160? 116. For that many people to go basically centuries without turning or like tattling on each other, that's impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah, it's the logistics of it is what drew me to this. I think it's like really interesting to think of how many people were doing this in the dead of night and how much tea was spilled and all that stuff. But it's also super interesting that they dressed as Indians. I'm going to say Indians because that was the term at the time, but we know today it's Native Americans. And so that was kind of the story for a long time, that these guys dressed as Native Americans and they snuck onto the ship in the middle of the night and all that happened. But what the reality is their dress, their disguise, wasn't really so much as a disguise, because they were not going to be pulling off that they were actually Native Americans. Nobody was going to think that a group of Native Americans did this, especially if they saw them. But what it really was symbolism. They were showing that, hey, we are Americans now. We're we are one with this land, and we are not a part of your government anymore. So it was really a symbolic act. So 30 chests of British East India Company tea weighing over 92,000 pounds, which is roughly 46 tons, on board the Beaver, the Dartmouth, and the Eleanor. They were all smashed open by the Sons of Liberty, and they had an assortment of axes, and so they were just axing away at these boxes and dumped them all into the harbor the night of December 16th in 1773. The cargo was worth more than $1.7 million in today's money. Merchant John Andrews wrote in his December 18th, 1773 letter that 10,000 pounds sterling of the East India Company's tea was destroyed that night, or rather the evening before last. The British East India Company reported 9,659 pounds, British pounds, worth of damages caused by the Boston Tea Party. But No damage was done to the ship itself. Nobody was harmed. It was all the padlocks and the tea. That was it. After the destruction of the tea, the participants actually swept the decks of the ship clean, and anything that was moved was put back in its proper spot. So absolutely the only thing that was damaged in this was the tea, which I think is really
I just
morally
love
upstanding.
like, yeah, we dumped all the tea. So anybody got a broom? Can we like, sweep it up? And like, you know, just like polite, like, yeah, we're gonna dump like $1 million worth of tea in like this big protest, but also like we're just gonna clean the deck a little bit, sweep it up. But also I want to know how this name Beaver got on the ship. Because I feel like that is such a weird name now, and even then. So I feel like if I feel like there had to be like a kind of like we had Bodie McBoatface. I feel like it has to be kind of like a crowdsourced one that like Beaver just naturally won. Unless it like the Europeans or people were just like really into beavers at that time, which it could be. Like, you know, there's gnomes everywhere I go now, so maybe there's a boat named Gnome. But yeah, I don't know. I just
There's I don't know where we got to gnomes.
But the beaver part, like, it's just so random. But I do think that's incredibly wholesome and kind of goes back to like they're not going to mess with their neighbors' stuff. They're just going to send a message to the people that they want to send that message to. I like that they still cleaned up after themselves, like proper.
I know,
like
I love it.
Proper citizens.
There was one ship called the William ship, and that one was missed. It was in the harbor, but nobody. It had. It was totally left alone. But I'm trying to look up the history of the name of Beaver, but I got a history of the ship instead, which is kind of interesting. It was captured by the Spanish, and at one point it was a slave ship. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's less exciting. Maybe we'll just move on from the Beaver.
Yeah, sad. I just think that the history of ships back then, it's just interesting time. But I digress. So, interestingly, the term the Boston Tea Party didn't emerge until half a century later and was initially referred to as the destruction of the tea. So it was like the unfortunate incident. The name gained popularity in the 1830s through books like A Retrospect of the Tea Party and Traits of the Tea Party. So kind of like World War II, World War I, it was named in retrospect. And not a lot of people know, but there was actually a sequel to the Boston Tea Party in March of 1774. So not even a full year later, Bostonians unyieldingly in their protest once again sent some tea splashing into the harbor. This time, 60 men boarded the Fortune, and they forced the crew below deck, and they dumped 30 chests into the harbor.
I did actually know about the second one, and I know that it's kind of known as like unsuccessful, and like it wasn't like not everyone was fully on board with it. They were just kind of like, no, we sent our message, like this is unnecessary.
I will also say that I got most of my information from today from the Boston Tea Party Museum, which is in Boston in the harbor. And let me tell you, is that the funnest thing? I love that. I had so much fun, but I'm a history geek. So have you ever been, Mary?
I've not been to Boston. It's high on our list to go. But yeah, I have not made it to ye old Boston. The closest I've gotten is Philadelphia. I've been inside the Declaration of Independence signing room and like the Constitutional Congress. So I've been in there, and that was really cool. But I've not made it up to Boston yet.
I need to go baback to Old Town Philly because we go to Philly all the time, but never did the historic section or area. And my husband like skipped that trip when we were, because here it's like for fifth grade you go to Philadelphia and you learn about the history, and he never went. So I've been dying to do that. But I highly suggest going. If you go to Boston, do the Boston Tea Party Museum. It's really cool. You get to go on a ship. You get a little card, and you're told like you're a character, of the secret meeting back then. You do a pretend secret meeting, and then you get to board the ship, and you can actually throw the tea overboard. It's fake, and it's on a rope, but it's super fun. All right. And that's pretty much all I have for today. Mary, would you like to regale us with some fun facts?
I would love to regale you with some fun facts. And Bria, let me tell you, there's quite a lot of fun facts that exist about that period of time. For example, did you by chance know that you know how like Americans drink a lot of alcohol now, right? It's America's favorite pastime, right up there with baseball. Well, turns out we have nothing on Americans in the Revolutionary War era. So I kind of have fun facts about that like entire era. They drank what is estimated to be about 3 times as much alcohol as we drink today, like per person.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably had like a really low volume though.
I don't know. I didn't get into like the ABV, just fun facts of it. But the reason they drank so much is that, they didn't really have a lot of clean, fresh drinking water. So beer, cider, rum, they're kind of safer than drinking from potentially contaminated streams or wells or anything like that. There's actually a distillery. I don't know if it still exists because I've not been to George Washington's house in Mount Vernon. But George Washington actually created a distillery on his property in Mount Vernon, and it produced 11,000 gallons of whiskey each year.
Wait, that's crazy. I did not know this.
Yeah. So he, there was kind of like that level. And then there was also, a lot of times they would get imported beers like the Madeira and other types of wine from Spain or anywhere else that, came in. And so it kind of became a thing that like the upper class would drink these imported wines and rums and beers and other things like that. And then, the average everyday American would just have stuff made here.
Interesting.
I know.
Let's have another round tonight.
But when it actually came, historically, from what I remember, which we're jumping back into the archives of my brain here, the Boston Tea Party kind of kicked off the beginning of what we know now as the Revolutionary War. It was one of the big, signs that things were coming, and that kicked off the Declaration of Independence and everything like that. So one of the big issues that they had in the war was actually feeding the soldiers. So now we have MREs and other things that we can package up and send with soldiers, and they just heat it up after they boil some water, and they have an entire meal that will last them for a long time. Turns out freeze-dried technology and dehydrated technology wasn't as, let's just say, wasn't as advanced back then. Dehydrating, obviously, that was something that's been around forever. Not necessarily forever, but for a very long time. But, freeze drying and packaging it up like that, it's a little difficult. So in 1775, the British had to send over boats of food for their soldiers. But, it took a couple months to cross the Atlantic at that point in time because, they didn't exactly have coal steamships or, other things like that. And so a lot of times food wouldn't necessarily get to the soldiers in a reasonable time or like in a positive condition because fruits and vegetables sometimes don't last very long for a couple months.
Ew, imagine shipping vegetables across the Atlantic in 1770s. Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of one of the things that is credited to, the British not necessarily being as successful in the war is that they couldn't get food to their people. Whereas, the Continental Army, they could get, they think they had rations that they got, I think, every day. And it was a pound of bread, half a pound of beef, and half a pound of pork, or 1 1/4 pound of beef if no pork was available. And then they also had a pint of milk, a quart of spruce or malt beer, and 1 gill, which is 4 ounces of peas, beans, or other vegetables. They were also supposed to get 6 ounces of butter and half a pint of vinegar per week. So they were getting that every day, and they were getting the nutrients and sustenance that they needed. And I don't know about you, if there's someone that I perceive as like the British who aren't on my side of the war, I'm not necessarily as a common citizen going to feed and house them, you know?
Yeah. Well, and let's not forget about the terrain and knowing knowledge is key.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that, people have said that even like the army itself has done a big study on how the logistics of the British Empire and the Continental Army, kind of how that cost them the Revolutionary War. So they didn't integrate that logistics and their strategy into their tactical plans. So, they didn't necessarily know the environment that they had here. They didn't know how long it would take, because if you think about it, Britain compared to America, even now, it's a funny thing that's been going around the internet of like, oh, British people think like, when Americans always go like, oh, you're from X place, is that close to London? And they're like, no, it's not. It's 2 hours away. Well, to me, 2 hours is a day trip. That's nothing. That's just like, I'm going to get in my car and drive. But also it takes only a couple hours to drive from one end of the United Kingdom to the other. So whereas here you can still drive for 6 hours and still be in Missouri. Like if I left my house, I could still drive and be in Missouri. I mean, shoot, you can drive 24 hours in Texas and still be there. So I think when it came to that battle part, when it came to the battle part of the war, the British just underestimated how much time it would take to go from one end to the other, because, you don't really know what that country is like, because your country is so small. Like a handful of states is as big as all of Great Britain is.
Yeah, I mean, I understand because I live in New Jersey, so I can't comprehend driving for hours and hours and still being in the same state. If I drive from Cape May to the top, maybe it'll be 4 hours, but that's about it.
But also, like, so that's 4 hours, and that takes you through like half of Great Britain, like, and that's by today's travel standards, not necessarily, because we know that it took longer back in the day. So, so what ended up happening was, because the supply from Great Britain took so long to get there, and they couldn't get that, they couldn't get their supply chain figured out, because contrary to popular belief, supply chain is a very important thing of war. The British Army, who were like left foraging for food, like off the land. But that is also really hard, because, the stuff that we have here isn't necessarily native to what's over there. So, so short story long, don't forget about your supply chain in the war.
We should name this episode "Logistics Saved the War
Logistics
for the
saved
United
America."
Yes, that's what I wanted to say. Logistics won the Revolutionary War for America. That's it.
Exactly. I mean, it did for the most part, because, yes, the Boston Tea Party kicked it all off. And yes, there was stuff getting imported from, a lot of East India Trading Company, but also there was a lot of things here that we were just able to utilize. And it helps when when you can, supply your people from an hour away versus an ocean away. Because you'll only be an ocean away.
I know. Okay, so I did forget to say that one of the most interesting things I think about this just shows, like, how things change over time. The actual location of the Boston Tea Party is thought to be at the corner of Congress and Purchase Streets, which was underwater, but now it's a busy intersection. So you can like walk around where they dumped the tea into the water. It's crazy.
How is it not water now?
Don't make me say it.
What?
Climate change?
Oh, because the water recedes.
Do we need to go here?
Brio?
Well, that's our merry moment for today. No, that wasn't that bad.
I was like, the water doesn't just go away. No, it does.
Yes, but it does.
Okay, well, I live in the Midwest. I don't understand about oceans and coasts.
No, it's not even probably climate change, because we're getting more water, but it's really just like the ever changing, like Boston has been, well, not just, they've been doing construction and changing things in Boston since then. So yeah, but it's just kind of cool to think that you could walk where they dump the tea.
I wonder if people just like pour out like a pure life tea bottle, just on that street corner. Pour one out for the homies.
One up for the homies. And on that note, thank you, everyone, for listening. That marks the end of today's episode. Another fun and goofy one. You can follow me on Twitter at JacoBrielle to see what else we have going on at FreightWaves Classics. And you can email me at bjacle@freightwaves.com. And Mary, where can they find you?
You can also find me learning how to speak. But you can find me on Twitter at Mary, X, formerly known as Twitter.
Nah, I'm not going there. Sorry.
At Mary O_119. And you can check out some of the other stuff that we do, check Call and Running on Ice on FreightWaves.com or anywhere else that you get your podcasts. And don't forget to, rate and subscribe this one. And give us some reviews. Let us know what we should talk about next time. We got a whole year ahead of us.
Yay! And tune in 2 weeks for our next episode on FreightWaves TV, or listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh, sorry.
South, I hope you start the episode like that. And